Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for listening. Thank you for downloading. And thank you for subscribing to the latest edition of the 12 Kyle podcast. I am your boy, 12 Kyle. I want to thank you all for tuning in as you do each and every week. Man, check this out. On this episode, I want to talk about marriage and friendships. First, let me tell you how I came to this topic. Um, it's interesting because I was having a conversation just a couple of weeks ago with my oldest son. My oldest son, Dion, is at the time of this recording 26 years old, which is amazing because it still feels like um, I remember the day he was born and it feels like it happened yesterday. So I don't know where these 26 years have gone. And I clearly don't look like someone who has a 26-year-old. Nonetheless, um, he and I were having a discussion, and what was interesting about the discussion was he came in town. We live in Atlanta. He doesn't live in Atlanta anymore, and he came in the city, and he was like, "Dad, I'm coming in town because um, one of my boys," and he said the name of his friend. He's like, he's getting married. And I was like, oh, snap. And I mean, like, this is one of his day one friends from college um, who was getting married here in Atlanta. And Dion lives in Huntsville, Alabama. And so I was like, wow, this is like your fourth friend who's gotten married. And he's like, yeah. And so he was telling me that one of the other homies that they, all of them were in this clique. They were in the band together at Alabama A&M University. And so they've been friends like since the day they set foot on campus. And as many of you know, Dion just recently graduated from Alabama A&M getting his master's degree. So, he arrived on the campus in 2017, but here it is now 2025. And, at 26 years old, he's got friends who are getting married and friends who've gotten married and it's like 5 different friends who've gotten married within the last, I don't know, 6 or 7 months. And so I made the comment, I was like, wow, this is wild because I can't believe your friends are getting married. And then I thought about it. I was like, I got married at 28, so it's not like, he's far from that age where I was when I got married. I became a father at 27. And so, we were having a discussion and he was telling me that like one of his friends was invited and another one of the day one homies, and he decided not to come. And he's kind of been acting kind of funny, and he's engaged too, by the way. And Dion was telling me about how he's been kind of acting kind of funny towards the crew. And I said, well, do you think he's acting weird because he's about to get married? And he was like, no, he's just acting weird, period. And it got me to thinking, do you change when you get married? Now, yours truly, 12 Kyle. At the time of this recording, just last week, my wife and I celebrated our 25th anniversary. It's okay. Y'all can clap. Appreciate it. Yeah. And so like, I can't tell you where the time went. And I remember my wedding day, like it was yesterday. And it's funny because Sharice and I went to dinner for our anniversary, and we were talking about, that particular day and, how things have gone over the years. And, I don't think you set out to be married for 25 years. You just, at least for me, it's not to sound cliche, but it's literally one day at a time because that's all that you have control over. You put things in front of you and you try to work towards goals, and you have individual goals, and then you have goals that you have as a couple and goals that you have for your family that you want your family to be. And, we've tried to set forth those goals for ourselves and more importantly for our kids. We have 3 other kids besides Dion. So, growing in a house where there's 3 boys and then a young lady, our daughter, Skylar, it's not easy. And then also being married and having all of that, and then still maintaining friendships. So the conversation got me to thinking. So I was like, let me ask some of my friends. So I shot my boy Jay Fresh a text, and Jay Fresh and I, we have literally been friends since we were 6 years old, right? Jay Fresh is one of my closest friends, and he's one of the few friends that I have from day one who isn't married or has never been married, doesn't have any kids, college educated. Um, he is he's the cat who I moved here to Atlanta with when we moved back in summer of 1997. And so I shot Fresh a text, and I'm like, yeah, I said, yo, do you think I changed when I got married? And in typical Jay Fresh response, he said, and I'm quoting him, "No, you the same Negro that you was back then that you are now, and you never changed." And he said you got more mature when you got married. He was like, "But you were still the same cat from Spalding Heights, where we grew up." And so that put a smile on my face. But I would, I didn't think that I'd change, and I don't think that marriage has changed me. Um, but I do agree that there's a level of maturity because in our situation, we had already had Dion, so he was almost actually he had just turned one. He turned one in August of 19 um, of 2000, excuse me, and then we got married in September of 2000. So he was a little more than one years old when we got married. So we had already had the family dynamic, but one of the things that was very important to me and also to Sharice as well is our friendships, because we both had like at least for me a lot of lifelong friends. I got friends from I literally have day ones from high school. I have day ones from South Carolina State University where Sharice and I met. And so it was very important for me to maintain those friendships. And I understand that, yeah, you're going to change to some degree. And maybe you don't have as much time for those friends as you normally would, but you know, do you make time? That's the key question. Do you make time for your friends once you get married? And what does that dynamic look like? Is it as something as simple as picking up the phone and making a phone call? Or is it something as simple as, hey, let's go out and grab a couple of drinks? For some people, that's problematic because they may think, okay, well, hey, you're married, so you shouldn't be going out. I never subscribed to that theory, but at the same time, I also understood that, you know, socially, we can't cut ourselves off. We have to make ourselves available, but we have to first and foremost be there for our significant others, our husbands or our wives. Um, and so I think that's important. And so we kind of operated ourselves and maneuvered like that. And, so when there was time for a girls' trip, or if there was time for a fellas trip, we never got in the way of each other or anything like that. And then I think one of the things that we both tried to do was initially we tried to make sure that our significant others, our spouses, basically, were cool with at least cool with our friends. Because listen, if your wife don't like your homeboy, I mean, that could be a problem for you because you probably not gonna be to hang with your homeboy. Now, how much hanging you do, it's it's really up to the individual. You know, I have a homeboy who, um, and I'm sure he wouldn't mind me telling this story, but like he and his wife dated in college, and so much like Sharice and I, he and then they lived together, and then they were getting married. And he really thought that, okay, once we get married, it's going to be the same. And he hung out, quite a bit, not hanging out as far as like, um, trying to bring women home because he was coming home to his girl, but he would just hang out. But the problem was, like, he would go to clubs and like he he wouldn't come home to like he would not leave the club until like the lights came on. Now in Atlanta the lights are coming on like 3:30, 4 o'clock in the morning. Listen, I can't justify that even as a single guy. That you If you did it once, okay, maybe. Multiple times, and again, no infidelity here. He's just hanging out with the fellas. So he really thought that, you know, he could do that at once he got married. And I pulled him to the side. I'm like, yo, like you, bro, you can't. You gonna have to cut this back. Matter of fact, you gonna have to cut this off because coming in at 2, 3 o'clock in the morning, it's just not a good look for a married man. And it can be problematic for some women because you know the fact that you're hanging out. And for some women, it's a problem if you're hanging out and you're hanging out with single friends. Now, I'll be the first to admit, I've never subscribed to that theory that because I'm married, I can only hang out with married guys. No, I mean, my friendship with Jay Fresh has nothing to do with me being married. I've been friends. We've been friends since we were 6 years old. So why shouldn't I hang out with him? That doesn't make any sense at all. But I've heard people say that. Oh, well, you're a married man. Why are you hanging out with single guys? Because I can. Don't get mad at me because you ain't got no friends. I got friends. My friends are there ride or die. So, what was interesting about the conversation that I had with Dion is, I just kind of explained to him that, to some degree, some friendships do change. And it's not necessarily a bad thing, but you just have to understand that people have to figure out how they're going to balance things. And it gets even more interesting once you have children. Now, one of his homies, who was actually the first one to get married, and he got married, I want to say maybe about a year and a half ago. We just found out he and his wife were expecting. So he's the first one in the crew to have a kid. And so that dynamic is going to change altogether because now, they probably not going to see him at homecoming at Alabama A&M. They probably, he's probably going to spend less time in the group chat. He's probably, when they come home and everybody's getting together for Christmas, a lot of times they'll go to his house and let's just say his name is Kevin. They'll go to Kevin's house and in years past, and don't get me wrong, Kevin's wife is really cool with Dion and the rest of their crew. But in fact, I think she went to school with him. But the thing is that, they're married. So, normally when they hang at Kevin's house. And I told him one time, I was like, look, it's cool and that you come in, when you come home that you go hang out at Kevin's house. I was like, but you gotta understand, Kevin's married. And even though you're cool with his wife and she went to school with y'all, like she still wants to be with her husband. And you don't want to overstay your welcome at their crib. And he understood what I was saying and he wasn't tripping, but I wanted to, bring that point home to him that they're a young couple. And even though everybody was tight and he was tight with Kevin in school, he has to give Kevin and his new fiance some space. And they're going to need even more space now that they are about to become parents. And so that's even less hanging out. So
thank you for tuning in to the latest edition of the 12 Kyle podcast. Whether you're listening during your commute, while working out, or just relaxing at home, we appreciate you. Every download, every listen, and every subscription means a lot. Up next, the 12 Kyle podcast.
Are you feeling nostalgic for the golden eras of rap and soul music? If so, tune in to the Rap Soul podcast. We are your weekly journey through the 80s, 90s, and 2000s, spotlighting the music and the hidden gems that shaped the soundtrack of our lives. From the powerful beats to the soulful melodies, we bring you the best of the past with fresh insights and stories. Rediscover the music that defined a generation. Subscribe to the Rap Soul podcast and enjoy the vibes. If you want a podcast where culture, conversation, and life collide, where you get insightful commentary, engaging discussions, and a fresh perspective on everything, then you need to listen to the 12 Kyle podcast. Hosted by the one and only, yours truly, 12 Kyle, a voice that you know and trust. This podcast will bring you thought-provoking moments, compelling stories, and a whole lot of fun. Whether you're a first-time listener or just tuning in, each episode promises to be something new and exciting. So sit back, relax, join 12 Kyle, myself, and my guests as we break down the world around us and give you stories that you've never heard before, from nostalgic throwbacks to everything in between. The 12 Kyle podcast is a front row seat to this conversation. Subscribe now and never miss an episode of the 12 Kyle podcast, where the vibe is always real and the discussion is always worth your time. But I think with the advent of technology, people can and probably will stay in touch a little bit more than normal. And we didn't have that back in 2000 when we got married. So I just, my homies that didn't live in Atlanta, they were a phone call away, but it was a long distance phone call. We had cell phones by then, but you had to you had to call after 7 p.m. or you had to call on the weekends, free nights and weekends. Shout out to AT&T back in the day. So how you communicate and how you stay in touch is important, but also you don't want to lose the friendship in the process, because I mentioned most of my friends, my close friends, my day ones from college and from back home in Florence, South Carolina, most of them got married. Now there's a few that, are now divorced, but I think the thing that's important is that we never got rid of our friendship. Our friendship stays strong throughout the years. And, while we went a point in time where we weren't communicating every single day just because we didn't have the technology to do it, once the technology evolved, then we were communicating pretty frequently. Now, I will say this much. I probably have more close friends than the average person. And that's not, it's just me, right? I can't really tell you why, but I've never said that I need to put a number on how many close friends I have. Like I hit one of my boys up from high school. And when I sent him a text, I realized we had not texted since my birthday. And my birthday was back in December. So, and I texted him maybe about 2 or 3 weeks ago. And so we had gone basically like 6-7 months without talking. I mean, we sent emails and stuff, but we had not communicated either on the phone or via text. And so it's just, catching up. I shot him a text, yo, man, what's up? Whatever, whoop-de-whoop. We chopped it up for a minute. We don't talk as much, but we're still close. At least I still think we're close. One of the other homies, he had a birthday yesterday, and I called him for his birthday, and I realized like I hadn't talked to him since I was in New York, which was back in June. So I hadn't talked to him in a couple of months. But we picked up right where we left off. And so, you have that. And then you have your friends that you talk to every day. And then, at least I have friends, in group chats that day ones from South Carolina State, day ones from Florence that I talk to literally every single day, all day. And so you keep those relationships and you keep those things going. Ultimately, I don't know that marriage necessarily can change your friendships. It could if you allow it to. I think a couple of things that you need to do, words of advice, if you will, that I would lend. Allow your spouse to get to know your friends through you, and then through meeting and being around them. I think sometimes as men, we tend to kind of paint this picture for our friends, and then let our wives kind of assume either the best or the worst. Because if you tell your wife that Charlie's a drunk, she's always going to remember the fact that you told her that Charlie was a drunk. So when Charlie comes around, she's going to expect Charlie and his drunken behavior. But if you tell her that Charlie's a good guy and he's going through some things since he got divorced, and he will drink a little bit, but if you paint that picture, she has a better understanding as to who Charlie is, and then give her a chance to spend some time around Charlie. I think that's important as well. Another piece of advice I would say is use all the time that you have to maintain those friendships, whether it be a text, whether it be a group chat, or me and some of my homies from Florence, my crew. We do it was supposed to be monthly, but we've kind of fallen off. Even though we chop it up in the group chat every day, all day. Back during COVID, we started just a monthly call where we would get on a video chat, and that way you could see everybody. And it's 6 of us, so we did that, and we were doing it, and we probably need to do another one probably coming up soon, just because. And what I learned about that is, even when you're texting and stuff, you can assume that your brother, and I refer to these guys as my brothers, you can assume that your brother's doing fine, but you never know until you actually talk to them. If you follow the podcast, I had Dr. Jamel on a couple of weeks ago, and Dr. Jamel and I, we will go a couple of weeks without talking, and then it's interesting because Dr. Jamel is another one who she's one of the few that is extremely close to my wife. And so there's a running joke in our household that, Sharice stole Jamel from me. So like Jamel's supposed to be like my best friend in the Marvel universe, and then Sharice took her from me. But they are extremely close. And then sometimes like Sharice will come in the house from work and she'll be like, "Oh, I'm on the phone with Jamel." And I'm like, "Hold up, man, you call her, you ain't talked to me in a month." That type of thing. And so we go back and forth. So if you ever hear her on the podcast and I refer to her as Sharice's BFF, you'll know exactly what I'm talking about. So that's kind of like the running joke. But I think even though, she's busy and I'm busy and we're both married, we don't talk every day. We probably could, but we don't talk every day. But I think if we get a phone call in or at least text once a month, I say once every 2 or 3 weeks. That's usually about where we are. We've been texting a lot more now because we're in the same fantasy football league. So she's talking trash and all kind of stuff like that. But I said all that to say this. I think it's important to maintain those friendships. I don't think marriage adversely affects your friendships. I think marriage can enhance your friendships. Marriage should want you to have those friendships, because ultimately, while you have your time and you have your space and you have that bond with your spouse, I think those friendships, particularly like if you're like me and you have day ones, those friendships are important too. They are very important. They need to be cultivated just like you cultivate your marriage. You have to put the time in. You don't want to disappear and have your homies wondering why you don't come around no more. And to some degree, when you're married, you can't hang out like that either. And the homies have to understand that too. And there's always some homies that never get married, and that's cool. But for the most part, I think most guys understand that. Like, they understand, like, if you call them and if they call you and they're like, "Yo, we going to the strip club tonight," you probably not going. I mean, it's not to say that you can't go, but you're probably not going. And after a while, those friends realize, like, yo, I can't call KD because KD's not coming. And it's that type of thing. Now, if you're talking about going to get some wings, at 3:00 in the afternoon, oh yeah, we may be able to roll for that. But the late night hitting the club and you calling me at 9:00 and we going out, we leave the crib at 11 to go to the club. We get to the club and I don't come home until 4:00 in the morning. That's probably not going to happen. And if it does happen, I may or may not be married that long. It's not to say that you can't have fun, because you're supposed to have fun with your friends at all times. But you also have to put things in perspective and prioritize things. And ultimately, that's what I told Dion. I said, I don't necessarily know that this friend is moving away from you guys because he's getting married, but he's kind of trying to find whichever lane he wants to be in. And you guys are going to be in a part of that lane, but there's also going to be some boundaries, and there's going to be some times where he may or may not respond. Now, I don't think that you should use that as a crutch. I don't think anybody should use, well, hey, I'm married. That's not a crutch. If we tight, we tight. If we cool, we cool. We're not, my marriage shouldn't get in the way of us being cool, because if we're cool and we're brothers and we lean on each other for everything, I don't think that, being married should come in between that. But also you have to understand that, and I think most people do, that when I'm married, I'm married. I've chosen to be with this person for my lifetime. And you're my friend for life as well. And both of you can coexist in my world, but we just have to balance it. And I think that's the biggest thing is, trying to find balance. And it gets even more enhanced once you have kids. And I'll be honest, it wasn't really something I really thought about, growing up, but it definitely, I would assume that it definitely changes for women, because now, once you get married, you're in this cocoon, if you will, with your husband. And then let's say 2 or 3 years pass and then you have a kid, then, I'm not going to say your social activities are all cut off, but like your social activities are really, going to be with your husband. And, occasionally you may go out to get a drink with your friends or something like that. But, it may be a lot to do with what you're doing at home. And it's not, there probably aren't any girls trips, at least until your kids are big enough to walk and talk and stuff like that. But it comes in due time, and everybody's life adjusts, and a part of being an adult is learning how to set boundaries. A part of being adult is learning how to balance things. One of the biggest juggling acts that we do as adults is being able to balance our lives. We balance our social life. We balance our home life. We balance our work life. And then some of us try to balance the time that we have for ourselves. And some of us, to be honest, don't really leave a lot of time for ourselves. And you probably should. But in conclusion, I don't think that marriages adversely affect your friendship. I think if you're doing the right thing, your friendship should maintain. But you have to put in the work, just like you have to put in the work for your marriage. You have to put in the work for your friendships, because ultimately you want to keep those friendships, and you definitely want to keep your marriage. Ladies and gentlemen, that's going to do it for me. Thanks again for checking out this edition of the 12 Kyle podcast. Be sure to subscribe to the podcast. We drop new episodes every Thursday and every Sunday. If you're on YouTube, check us out and subscribe there. You can watch each episode on YouTube. We're also on Spotify video, so you can watch episodes on Spotify and leave comments there as well. If you'd like to contribute to the podcast financially, hit us up. Cash App, $TWELVEKYLE. Also, we have merch. Click the link in the description box that says merch. There you can find 12 Kyle Podcast t-shirts, hoodies, as well as coffee mugs. We got it for the low. Also, don't forget, we have a new baby. It is called the Rap Soul Podcast. It is the intersection where we have discussions about hip hop, rap, R&B, and soul music from the 80s, the 90s, and the 2000s. I'll be honest, it's the best music podcast that you've never heard. So check it out. Ladies and gentlemen, once again, that's going to do it for me. I am your boy, 12 Kyle. I'll catch you guys next time. 5,000. Cheer!
Thanks again for listening to this episode of the 12 Kyle podcast. If you enjoyed this episode, make sure that you hit the subscribe button and share this podcast with a friend who needs the 12 Kyle podcast in their life. Every listen, every download, and every share helps us grow. Thanks for being a part of the 12 Kyle podcast community. We appreciate your support. We will catch you next time. 5,000.